We now turn to A Moment in the Sun, Re-enslavement through Jim Crow. By the Civil War, enslaved Black Americans were the most valuable asset in the United States. More than all the railroads and factories combined, even our banking system developed around this asset to allow enslavers to buy new slaves in exactly the way we now buy a new house. Their land was worth nothing, but their slaves were worth a fortune. So our first mortgages were not on homes, but on slaves. To protect these assets from running away or rebelling, slave codes were developed. Slaves could not travel, learn to read, gather without a white person, own firearms, or defend themselves against attack. Enforcing these codes was the duty of all white people. White men had rotating terms of service on slave patrols. And did the Civil War free the slaves? As you know, there was one exception. Analogous to slave codes were the Black codes designed to recreate slavery. These were prohibitions on voting, serving on juries, testifying against whites, or interracial marriage. There was a requirement to show proof of employment and annual contract. There were limits on owning and leasing agricultural land, and taxes limited to Blacks. The penalties for this were unpaid labor, in other words, slavery, and children of convicted parents were apprenticed or enslaved to former plantation owners. The North's victory in the Civil War set the stage for civil rights in favor of Black Americans. Blacks were elected to state legislatures, the House of Representatives, and the US Senate. South Carolina's 1868 legislature was mostly Black. Congress overrode the Black codes planned by racist Southern legislatures by the Civil Rights Act of 1866 over the veto of Southern Democrat and former slave owner Andrew Johnson. And then the 14th and 15th Amendments were passed, guaranteeing citizenship, equal legal protection for all, and the right to vote. And yes, reparations. For economic security, 400,000 acres of coastland from South Carolina to Florida were reserved for African American development and self-governance. But after Northern armies left the South in 1877, all of these legal and economic rights were removed through racist policies. In the words of Du Bois, quote, "The slave went free, stood for a moment in the sun, then moved back again towards slavery," unquote. America entered its dark age of official white supremacy, an age of convict leasing, peonage, sharecropping, white terrorism, ranging from the KKK to rampant race riots in the early 1900s to the Texas Rangers. States created laws that essentially criminalized Blackness. For example, vagrancy. It was illegal not to carry proof of a job, speaking loudly around white women, selling farm products after dark, bargaining for job conditions, or changing jobs without the permission of your employer. Criminalization kept slavery, but changed the ownership from individuals to the state. Rather than to spend money on prisons, states increased their income through leasing convicts for labor, earning profits for governments, middlemen, and providing free labor in agriculture, mining, and manufacturing. They could literally work men to death. Unlike slaves, they weren't purchased, only leased. So they would just get another convict. There was also peonage or debt slavery, where defendants who were too poor to pay would have their debts paid by a white person, who then had their right to free labor. Or workers unable to buy their own land were forced into debt, but never been able to earn enough to buy their freedom from debt. As a result, by 1890, 90% of the 19,000 prisoners in the South were Black. Slavery did not become illegal in any form until 1951. From an economic point of view, Jim Crow policies were essential for cotton production. So a Jim Crow educational system also ensured African Americans were too uneducated to leave sharecropping. One scholar describes how South Carolina, where Blacks and whites were roughly equal in population, had 0 Black high school graduates until a private foundation stepped in. This 1937 map shows plenty of open dots indicating white high schools, but very few Black dots indicating underfunded, unaccredited Black high schools. The present author's grandfather graduated high school in 1935. When only 4% of graduates were Black students, thousands more were stopped by Jim Crow. The combined effect of the school to prison pipeline and early death of Black men has been to remove 17% of Black men from the Black community. If this applied to white Americans, roughly 8.7 million men would be missing, more than the entire construction workforce. We now go on to cultural genocide, kill the Indian and save the man. Imagine your own children, if you have them, or maybe those of a sibling or friend if you don't, when they were small, barely old enough to attend school. Recall your love, hope, anxieties, fear, and pride for them. Now, imagine a government official coming to your home and taking them away from you. When you resist, they threaten to throw you into maximum security prison or prevent you from getting food or threaten to take other children you may have. Your children are then taught that your own family's heritage, customs, way of dressing, all are wrong. You taught them to be proud of their long hair, so first they cut your children's long hair. Imagine you're one of these children. You're stripped of your clothes and even your name. You might even come to forget your name. When you tried to speak your mother language, your mouth was washed with lye soap, or you endured some other punishment. Your traditional singing and dancing are forbidden. The religion your parents hold tightly, you are told, will send them to hell. This lasts from generation to generation. As one survivor stated, you're forever left feeling that a piece of you has been removed, like a puzzle piece that's lost forever. Innumerable children were starved, beaten, brainwashed, sexually abused, and many died. The atrocities of Indian boarding schools continued until a 1928 independent report of the Bureau of Indian Affairs highlighted the grossly inadequate provisions at boarding schools, including basic food and health resources. The purpose of Native American boarding schools, not to mention the policy of adoption, which had the same goals, was cultural assimilation. But to many Native Americans, it was tantamount to ethnic cleansing. This multi-generational experience is nowhere better summarized than by the Army officer who founded the prototype of all these schools, Carlisle Indian School, and who said, "All the Indian there is in the race should be dead. Kill the Indian in him and save the man." Native Americans are 2 to 3 grade levels below whites in reading and math, 237% more likely to drop out, and 207% more likely to get expelled from school. Out of every 100 kindergartners, only 7 will get a bachelor's degree compared to 34 of whites. Only 71% of students graduate from high school, and only 30% complete college. At the Bureau of Indian Education, the schools that are of the Bureau of Indian Education have a graduation rate of only 53%.